Let's see if we're going. Nope.
Yes, we are.
All right. Yes, we are. All right. Hello, everybody. We're back for another episode, another week of Goddess Bible Study. Thank you, everybody, for showing up. We got Joshua, we got Nathan, we got Lisa in the house, so the regular crew. So thank you, guys and ladies, so much for showing up. So the usual edwarddodge.substack.com if you want to read the write-ups, and goddessbiblestudy@gmail.com if you want to reach out and join our chat group or anything. Anyone that's listening. So anyway, today's episode, like and subscribe. I guess I'm supposed to say that too. So anyway, part 2 this week of King Solomon, and we're going to dive into the wisdom texts. Today's image is ChatGPT again. I asked for an image of King Solomon in his in a lavish throne room with his. For an image of King Solomon in his. Whoa! What's happening here?
Sorry, I was making sure you were
Okay.
online. There you go.
So sitting in his famous throne with lion heads, speaking to a crowd with a statue of the goddess in her battle armor in the background, and I don't know, that image turned out pretty good, I think. ChatGPT. So anyway, we're gonna keep it pretty simple this week. We're just gonna dive into these wisdom texts. King Solomon is famous for writing the biblical books of Proverbs, Ecclesiastes, and the Song of Songs, as well as the Apocryphal book, The Wisdom of Solomon, and some Psalms. King Solomon has inspired poets, philosophers, theologians, and magicians for centuries. Some of the most profound literature in the biblical tradition is attributed to him. And King Solomon was a goddess worshiper. The Bible tells us so. He is the conduit through which the visceral pagan goddess traditions were transmuted into the ephemeral wisdom traditions of Sophia. Sophia is the one aspect of the feminine divine that is acceptable in the Abrahamic faiths, and she lies at the heart of every Western esoteric tradition, from the Gnostics and Kabbalah to the Freemasons. So basically, there's no nature-based traditions, no sex and drugs in the Western, in the monotheistic traditions, but they do have Sophia, and Sophia is kind of all over the place in various, both the Orthodox and esoteric traditions. All of these texts, most of these texts, but really all of these texts, were actually written long after King Solomon's time in the post-exilic and Hellenistic periods, though some of the earliest Proverbs and Psalms may have come from the First Temple. Magical texts about Solomon continued to be written for another 1,000 years, well into the Islamic world and in medieval Europe. So Solomon has been inspiring people for a very, very long time, and many, many texts continue to be written in his name and in the spirit of King Solomon's wisdom. From 500 BC to 1500 BC, or 1500 AD, I should say. So there's no evidence that King Solomon personally wrote anything, since there's no evidence of literacy in the time period that he was alive, the 10th century BCE. The court of a historical King Solomon, if he even existed at all, was likely operating in the oral tradition. Written Hebrew was a new language in the Iron Age, and first appears in the historical record a century after Solomon. Perhaps his court had some role in early Hebrew writing, which was copied from the Phoenicians, who were friends of Solomon, but the Bible itself does not say so. The Bible makes no mention of King Solomon writing anything, and if he helped invent a new form of writing, they probably would have given him credit. So I am personally content to believe there was a historical King Solomon and a first temple in Jerusalem in the 10th century BC, but I do not believe that most or any of the legends about him are historical. His wealth, his wives, and his wisdom all serve a variety of symbolic and theological purposes in the Bible. This King Solomon, the biblical King Solomon, is a literary figure who represents the Yahweh's greatest mythological and propagandistic glory, a united kingdom overflowing with wealth and great achievements that likely never existed in real life. Yet King Solomon has inspired some of the deepest philosophy for thousands of years. We will let these samples speak for themselves. These are rare passages from the Bible in which the goddess speaks, even if she is somewhat veiled. Wisdom is Sophia and Shakti, the divine mother. So, any comments there before we dive in?
I just
So
think
the
it's
rest of
beautiful
it,
what you mentioned with the
what's that?
language part. That was fantastic with the language part. That's very thought provoking.
Oh, right. Yeah, that he's credited with all his writing, but he didn't actually write anything, and that the written language appears in the historical record after him. But like again, close enough to be ambiguous. But like the Bible would have said, King Solomon wrote such and such down, and they certainly would have given him credit if he'd done something like help invent a new written language. I mean, for geez Louise, they definitely would have given him credit for that, you know. So everything I've got here is just taken from the Bible. And so these are really my favorite passages from the Bible, to be honest with you. Like, we're not going to do Song of Songs tonight, but all the rest of this stuff is Proverbs, Ecclesiastes, the wisdom of Solomon. I think these are when I started reading the Bible again for all this research a couple of years ago, these were the parts of the Bible that I really found really quite rewarding to read, and that I would recommend to anyone. If I had to turn any like non-believer to read a part of the Bible, it's always Proverbs, Ecclesiastes, and Song of Songs. So anyway, this is from Proverbs. Blessed is he who finds wisdom. Blessed are those who find wisdom, for those who gain understanding, for she is more profitable than silver and yields better returns than gold. She is more precious than rubies. Nothing you desire can compare with her. Long life is in her right hand, and in her left hand are riches and honor. Her ways are pleasant ways, and all her paths are peace. She is a tree of life to those who take hold of her. Those who hold her fast will be blessed. I mean, I think this is just totally true. I feel like I can read this and apply it to everything I'm talking about, and with Shakti and goddesses in general. And I just find that all of these passages just totally ring true. Any comments before I move on? So the next part we're coming into is like the second or the third creation bits. Like there's the first two books or the first two chapters of Genesis that talk about creation, but then this is another creation part, which includes wisdom. So here it says, these are all from Proverbs. By wisdom, Yahweh laid the earth's foundations. By understanding, he set the heavens in place. By his knowledge, the watery depths were divided, and the clouds that dropped the dew. My son, do not let wisdom and understanding out of your sight. Preserve sound judgment and discretion. They will be a life for you, an ornament to grace your neck. So by wisdom, Yahweh laid the earth's foundations. So wisdom was there with Yahweh at creation itself. And the next passage will go into that some more. And this is again, like she is primordial, primeval, right there from the very start. By his knowledge, the watery depths were divided. The waters of creation, like the chaotic waters of Shakti that are there at creation. So again, it's just reinforcing all of these narratives. So excellence of wisdom. Does not wisdom call out? Does not understanding raise her voice? At the highest point along the way where the paths meet, she takes her stand. Beside the gate leading into the city, at the entrance, she cries aloud. To you, O people, I call out. I raise my voice to all mankind. You who are simple, gain prudence. You who are foolish, set your hearts on it. Listen, for I have trustworthy things to say. I open my lips to speak what is right. My mouth speaks what is true, for my lips detest wickedness. All the words of my mouth are just. None of them is crooked or perverse. To the discerning, all of them are right. They are upright to those who have found knowledge. Choose my instruction instead of silver, knowledge rather than choice gold, for wisdom is more precious than rubies, and nothing you desire can compare with her. I, wisdom, dwell together with prudence. I possess knowledge and discretion. To fear Yahweh is to hate evil. I hate pride and arrogance, evil behavior and perverse speech. Counsel and sound judgment are mine. I have insight. I have power. By me, kings reign and rulers issue decrees that are just. By me, princes govern, and nobles, all who rule on earth. I love those who love me, and those who seek me find me. With me are riches and honor, enduring wealth and prosperity. My fruit is better than fine gold. What I yield surpasses choice silver. I walk in the way of righteousness, along the paths of justice, bestowing a rich inheritance on those who love me and making their treasuries full. Yahweh brought me forth as the first of his works, before his deeds of old. I was formed long ages ago at the very beginning when the world came to be. When there were no watery depths, I was given birth. When there were no springs overflowing with water, before the mountains were settled in place, before the hills, I was given birth before he made the world, or its fields, or any of the dust of the earth. I was there when he set the heavens in place, when he marked out the horizon on the face of the deep, when he established the clouds above and fixed securely the foundations of the deep, when he gave the sea its boundaries so the waters would not overstep his command, and when he marked out the foundations of the earth. Then I was constantly at his side. I was filled with delight day after day, rejoicing always in his presence, rejoicing in his whole world and delighting in mankind. Now then, my children, listen to me. Blessed are those who keep my ways. Listen to my instruction and be wise. Do not disregard it. Blessed are those who listen to me, watching daily at my doors, waiting at my doorway. For those who find me find life and receive favor from Yahweh. But those who fail to find me harm themselves. All who hate me love death. That's Proverbs 8, 1-36. I think this is a really important passage. And you guys have anything to say on that? Because I do.
I have some things to say, but go ahead
Yeah.
first.
Yeah.
Well, I was going to say this whole part where she is with Yahweh, and it says, Yahweh brought me forth as the first of his works. I think this is a very clear case of like this is theological warfare. We're like,
Yep.
this is being written by the Yahwehs,
Yep.
and they're making a very clear attempt to establish Yahweh as first in line and primacy and having primacy. And so they're kind of reordering the cosmos to put Yahweh first and the goddess second, even though she's right there with him. Other traditions would have had her first, but this is being written by the Yahwehs. It's not being written by the Elohists or by anybody else. This is specifically a Yahweh text. And so they're putting Yahweh first in line.
Yeah.
Definitely makes Sophia or wisdom sound as though it's Yahweh's consort or partner too, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, and I would say a created partner, because this seems to indicate that she's not eternal.
Right. That he created her.
He created her. So she is this is like a very strange kind of like sophistry. It's like a nod to her being great, but at the same time putting her down into a second place. When you take this and you like compare it to like the Enuma Elish, where you have it was Tiamat and Abahu. What's his name? Abahu. They're co-eternal.
Right.
And she is.
Tiamat is the primordial salt waters. And
and they're both waters. That speaking to that earlier verse, the father Bahu is masculine and she's obviously feminine, Tiamat, and he's fresh water, she's salt water. But anyway, you have this subjugation here that's clearly going into a monotheistic realm rather than deifying the feminine here, for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. So like the one way you might imagine it, or I might imagine it, is that like there's still another primordial mother, and this is just one of the many daughters. So wisdom is a daughter of Shakti, you might say. But the text doesn't say that. That's just me reading into it. But I mean, clearly, I think we're all in agree that this is clearly written to put Yahweh in the primary position, which is their theological project, and have everybody else be secondary. But it's just notable that wisdom is like number 2. He's number one, she's number two, and everything else flows from there.
Right.
There's also another
Absu. That's the
creation
name. Absu.
that
Sorry.
was regarding. Sorry, my bad. Now there's another creation one as well regarding the story with a goddess as well. That's in the New Testament, the beginning of the Gospel of John. That's only in the Greek. That's regarding to Logos, Theos, and Zoe. And so, if you want to translate into Hebrew or Greek, basically, it can change as well. So that's always linked with Sophia, so God's feminine wisdom. That can change to, in the beginning there was El's word or Torah, and Zoe, so the light, which is the light of all human beings, and that goes back into the feminine aspect of God, so beyond sex and gender. And something that you mentioned about being sisters or daughters and that sort of stuff, which is great because they were believed in some Gnostic Christians there were lesser emanations of Sophia, so two Sophias, a divine one and a lesser one that creates matter. So depending on Gnostic group you're looking at too, but it also kind of sounds familiar with some of the Hindu myth. I think it's Brahma, who I believe creates a wife as well. I think you might know this one better, Edward.
So the Hindus also have the primordial waters, what they call Shakti, and then Vishnu is the high god who emerges. So Shiva, Shakti are uncreated and eternal, and so Shakti being the primordial waters, Shiva being source consciousness. Then out of those primordial waters, Vishnu is born. And Vishnu comes with Saraswati, who's his consort, his Shakti. And then so Vishnu he's the preserver. He's the high, like the sort of high being. He's the high god. But then out of his belly comes Brahma. And Brahma is the creator of our world. And there's a million different Brahmas who created a million different worlds because they have like a multiverse worldview in Hinduism. So you have a bunch of Brahmas, and Brahma's consort is Saraswati. So, she's the goddess of wisdom. And so Saraswati, and she's presented with in the artwork, she's always playing a musical instrument. So she's a goddess of music and philosophy and art, and all like sort of wisdom traditions come from Saraswati. And she goes hand in hand with Brahma, the creator. And Vishnu's consort is Lakshmi, and she's the goddess of prosperity. And so she's like the mother who wants, like, she's pictured with coins coming out of her hands and other images of like material wealth and material prosperity, because the goddess wants you to prosper and wants us all to prosper. And so, which I just think is interesting in and of itself. But yeah, they're all born out of the waters.
Is there a story with Brahma having a head taken off as well in one Hindu oral tradition, with regarding to your lustful head for his consort or daughter or wife, who when he creates or something like that? That's what I thought I'd ask
I
as
don't
well.
know about that story. Ganesh loses his head and gets replaced with an elephant head. But that's a different character. He's the son of Shiva and Parvati, and I forget why he lost his head. But they replaced it with an elephant. I forget that whole story though.
Well,
Brahma
it's just
isn't all that many stories. Like Brahma, people don't really worship Brahma. When I went to India, I realized that so Vishnu comes as Krishna and Ram. He has avatars, and so he comes to Earth as Krishna, comes to Earth as Rama, and so those are the really popular gods that you see all over India. Is Krishna and his whole pantheon, and then Rama. There's two different sets of stories, so they have a whole bunch of characters, and those are really popular gods in India. So if you're a follower of Vishnu, you're going to be, in practical terms, following Krishna or Ram. People worship Shiva and Shakti, the goddesses, but nobody worships Brahma. There's no Brahma temples. There's like maybe one in all of India. I think there's like people run out of bandwidth for too many temples, I think.
You know what I'm thinking about though, since we're on sort of like Hindu pantheon. How many, like, we know that there are certain goddesses, like for instance, Kali, and who's the other one that is so much like her that rides the tiger?
Durga.
Kali
Durga.
and Durga go together. Yep.
Yeah, but they don't have male counterparts.
They
Well,
do.
Kali goes with Shiva, and Durga is famous for not having a counterpart. She's the exception to the rule, and so Durga is unencumbered. she's the maiden, so she's an unmarried, childless, so the quote unquote virgin.
She's the virgin, right?
Mm.
Right.
But I also like I always think it's like odd because if Shiva is uncreated, then and Shakti is uncreated, those two are, you know, the primordial, you know,
Right.
masculine, feminine, yin yang, whatever. But how can it be that Kali and Shiva, right, are a thing?
Because it's Parvati, Durga, and Kali are a triple goddess, and they all go with Shiva. So Shiva and Parvati are the husband and wife, so to speak. And then Parvati manifests as either Kali or she manifests as Durga in different stories. And then Durga, Kali get combined. So when you go to India, similar to Brahma, you don't really see Parvati temples. You see temples to Durga and you see temples to Kali, but you don't really see temples to Parvati. In fact, when I was looking for artwork, I had a hard time finding any artwork of Parvati. Durga and
Mhm.
Kali were super common, but Parvati, in the popular day to day, she manifests as Durga and Kali. So, but they're also all Parvati because they're all the triple goddess of mother maiden, destruction.
I found a story I was after too, by the way. You might have
Because
to help
like
me
in
pronounce.
this story, like in the image behind me where Shiva's lying, I don't know if you can see. Hold on.
Kali is always depicted as standing victorious with one foot on top of a man. And is that supposed to be Shiva?
That is Shiva, but he's not. It's not victorious. Shiva is taking a nap and he's chilling, and you can't really see it, but he's got a smile on his face. He's lying in a field of wildflowers, and Kali is his wife, and she's out like slashing the demons because Parvati got upset, and so she turned into Kali to go wreak destruction. And Shiva is smart enough to stay out of her way until she's done. So Shiva's just waiting for her. He's taking a nap. He's chilling in a field of wildflowers. He's got all of his stuff. He's got can't really. I'd have to focus in on it, but he's got his snake. He's got his trident. He's
See
got
the
all of his
snake.
things. His
Uh-huh.
third eye is wide open. And you can't see because it's hidden behind her leg, but he's got a great big erection as well. And so he's just waiting for her to notice the present that's waiting for her between her legs. And at some point she's going to notice and she's going to sit down and take a ride. And then she's going to calm down and turn back into the loving wife, Parvati, and peace will be restored.
But he's dominating him.
Yeah, but he's just chilling, hanging out, waiting.
Well,
Yeah, she's dominant for sure, but like he's not like been defeated. He's like taking a nap.
this sleeping trope though is very, very ancient. It's also in the Enuma Elish with Apsu and Tiamat. He is the way the story goes and the way I understand it is, you know, they're both uncreated, Apsu and Tiamat, and once they come together, once they have relations and children are being born to them, things start getting really noisy and it starts to annoy Apsu. And Apsu is like, this is a noisy place. I want to get rid of all these people. And you can see allusions to this, I think, in the Old Testament. They kind of pick up on this ancient story of like things are getting busy down there.
Right.
But anyway, the sounds are annoying Apsu, who just wants to go back to rest and sleep and be at peace. And he comes up with this idea that he's just going to destroy his children. Tiamat says, absolutely no. The children get informed of this. And then the way the story goes is Inki, one of their children, puts Apsu under a spell and makes him sleep, and he's still asleep to this moment because he's under a spell. So, and then eventually these children take over and destroy Tiamat, and there's a whole nother story to that. But the whole fabric of reality that we're in, of these primordial waters, the salt water and the fresh water that created this whole universe, one's asleep and one's basically scattered in all the material existence that we have. This desk in front of me, all this computer, that's all Tiamat just disintegrated. And the gods that came after her are the ones that are in control of this whole world, and it just starts a whole order down. And so that story you just told me, like right there, about this sleeping and Kali standing on top of Shiva. This is this idea of the masculine being like asleep is really an interesting like trope that I'm starting to find quite interesting here. It makes me want to, what is that?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, Shiva's he's the cosmic dancer. He's the cosmic meditator. He's kind of like, he's around for endless amounts of time, so he's kind of passive for like extended periods of time, right? And just chilling. He just meditates for for eons at a time, and so he's not worried about what Kali is getting up to because it's not bothering him.
Excuse me to interrupt. I just remembered in that story of why what's driving Tiamat's anger was that the hubris of her children to kill her husband, Absu, that's what made her so angry. So that's like the origination of, well, I don't know if that would trickle down into the whole motif of Kali, but looking for, what's driving the chaos and the upset. It's this idea of patricide, I guess, is what you could like link it to. And you see that in the Greek pantheons too. There's this constant fear of being usurped by the younger. You have Uranus and Gaia. They come together, and then Kronos wants to chop off, and because he's afraid of being usurped. It's the same. It's like the same story, just translated out.
And I do think that these stories speak to like one culture replacing the previous culture and referencing literally the previous generation of the gods from like the previous culture, that like the Hellenistic gods are replacing the Mycenaean gods in the Greek pantheon, and the Enuma Elish is like the Sumerians were there before, and they're getting replaced by the Babylonians or the Chaldeans or whatever you want to call them that come later.
I also found that story, by the way, Edward. It was based on the Hindu. You might correct me on this pronunciation. Puranic literature.
The Puranas.
Yeah, look, that's the one. Lord Shiva was the one that chopped off the lustful or arrogant head of Lord Brahma that was lustful over Saraswati. It wasn't Krishna, I was wrong. So yeah, that was where it comes from. So that story kind of reminded me of that in a sense, with the feminine being created and then somewhat being lustful over and put into a second place.
Yeah, I don't know all the Hindu stories. There's a zillion of them.
But there's too many to keep track of.
I mean, that's how we got on this tangent is in this Hebrew text here. They are definitely breaking from tradition from the more ancient cultures that kept her as an uncreated.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah,
this what we just read in the Proverbs. She is definitely becoming subjugated here as a creation.
100%.
There is a section of this though that I want you to scroll up to. There is a paragraph essentially where it talks about that wisdom that she like gives. She's the kingmaker essentially. Where was that? Here we go. They're right here.
Kings reign and rulers issue decrees. This.
Yeah. Now, the reason that I find that interesting is because there's been this idea going around for a long time.
You're breaking up. Can you speak into the mic? Oh, there you go. That's better.
Yeah. This idea that's been going around for a long time about certain women and often priestesses are the king makers. They're,
like Bathsheba last week.
Yeah, something like that, right? And so you see some of this depicted in like a lot of historical fiction where like there's a king and maybe there's like a witch or priestess that's kind of like at his side and his counsel and is like showing him what to do and telling him what to do, and also probably having sex with him as well. But there's this idea, and it's been taking hold quite a bit in some of the spiritual communities and online, with people talking about the differences between masculine and feminine energy, that women who hold themselves in a certain way and are very feminine energy oriented are the king makers. They bring out um those kinds of like the wisdom and the generosity and the ability to rule and make safe, and all of these sort of masculine qualities in a man. Like this idea that women, and especially if they're more like priestessy, that they have the ability to activate these certain qualities in men that that make men aspire to be greater, like a king would be. And I don't know if you guys have come across that, but that's like been going all over the place for a while. And I just when you read that, that's exactly what this made me think of. That like there are times when the woman or the priestess or the feminine is what makes the king or the ruler or the man powerful.
100%. And the Devi Sukta, which is like the hymn to the goddess from the Vedas, like one of the very oldest, like in any written text anywhere, that's like from the Bronze Age Vedas, has a passage to that effect that says, I bend the bow for Rudra, which is another name for Shiva. I bend the bow for Rudra. I make my man exceedingly mighty. Something like that. Anyway,
At least at even if they're subjugating Sophia, at least they are acknowledging that she is valuable.
and still, like, this is the best we get in the Bible. Like, this is all we get. So
Yeah, this is it. Lap it up,
this is it.
folks.
Can't have everyone with wisdom. It'll be too problematic for ones in charge.
Right. Totally. I know they don't actually
That's
want
it
everybody
right
having
there.
wisdom. No, it is.
Well, I mean,
about
you
authority.
could just extrapolate what you're saying, Lisa. If Solomon had all these wives from all around the world, could you not say that that's because of his knowledge? I mean, knowledge is equated with the sexual act all the way back from Genesis. You know, to know someone. So when you think of knowledge,
know them biblically, right?
he's universal in the sense that he's knowing women from all around the world.
Right, and that they
So,
were more like pagan, and that they were coming in and like showing and teaching him their ways.
The word apdo can mean to touch, transform someone spiritually through touch, but can also mean to know someone sexually. And you find that in the Gospels. I loved it when you brought that up, by the way, Edward.
Well, the word to know in English, if you track it back, it means to cut. It means to split, because you can't. And even this even gets back to maybe even what you were saying too, Lisa, is
childbirth.
You can't, without two, one defines the other. You can't have a king without a queen. You can't have a kingdom. You can't have a king without a kingdom. Everything is self-defining. Like a unit or a one is just a unit. There's nothing to define in a monolith. It's only when there's another that it distinguishes this from that. And so, like, the idea of knowing something is to split something and say, from this says that, and that says this. Before that, there is no knowledge. If everything is one, there is nothing else. So there's nothing to talk about. It's only after differentiation of the two that you can even have knowledge. So some believe that that's why the word knowledge comes from the word to cut, to like split something. And so when you think of the sexual act of splitting like the hymen, it's an act of knowing into that other person.
And all of these creation stories and things that we're talking about, they're literally talking about splitting the waters, right?
Splitting the waters.
And that's
Yeah.
what they do to
Yeah.
Tiamat as well in that story. They cut Tiamat in half
Yeah.
in the innumerable
Yes,
leash to
and
create.
open her belly up, and
Right.
she gives birth, essentially, in a different way. Yeah. I mean, so there you go, right? Like it still ties into the feminine.
Yeah, it's such an important thing to like realize that if there was only the feminine, we wouldn't even have the word feminine. It's self-defining. If you have to have the masculine in order to understand the feminine, and vice versa, or else they just collapse in and of themselves. And it's such an important thing that really, when we're talking about bringing back the goddess and restoring her, it's truly restoring even the God. We have never known the God because we have nothing to define him by. And that is the great irony, and possibly the beautiful paradox of what we're discussing here, is that this idea, the theology that everybody talks about, has no definition because it's never been, it's not understood in its eternal two coupling. That's all.
A noble God.
Yeah. It's an unknowable God. Yeah.
And that's why we get this inaccurate portrayal of him as omnipotent and alone, which I just fundamentally think is a false metaphysical proposition. I think if you drop the monotheism and put the mother back in the equation, then God makes sense. But the absolute the omnipotence, like that's the part that can't be proven, that they always assert that God is omnipotent and God can do anything. And then the non-believers are like, well, why did this omnipotent God that supposedly loves us create a world of suffering, evil, and death? And there's never been a good answer for it. You know, they write book after book after book of rhetorical backflips trying to make sense of why a loving God creates a world of suffering, evil, and death. But when you put the mother in the equation, who is creation and destruction, then that life and death becomes, as you're saying, self-referential. Because why do we die? Because we live. Why do we suffer? Because we have joy. That suffering and joy are the inversions. There's no joy without suffering. There's no life without death. And so, and that makes sense when you have the mother in the equation, but it doesn't make sense when the mother is dropped out of the equation.
1000%, Ed. 1000%. That's why this is such a sacred thing. And this is why this Sophia wisdom that's hidden in these texts right here, of what it's saying outside of it being created, it's so true. It still rings true. They couldn't hide this because this is a deep truth of that. Until you recognize her, there is no wisdom, and until you understand what we were just talking about,
exactly,
about the self-referential aspect of what we're discussing here. There is no knowledge of God without her, and vice versa.
Wisdom
So we're at the
reposes in
next
the heart
one.
of the discerning, and even among fools she let herself be known. The heart of the discerning acquires knowledge, for the ears of the wise seek it out. The one who gets wisdom loves life. The one who cherishes understanding will soon prosper. That's the end of Proverbs.
And that is true. I have, ever since I've come into my reverence for the goddess, I have truly been turned on for the love of life itself, not just cerebral ideas of God or going into the afterlife, but like all of a sudden seeing the animals or seeing the birds, just the trees, and just the whole teeming earth of what life is, and everything has become extremely real in my, once I became more attuned to her, rather than just not even knowing she was there. So I mean, that last verse there is very, very good. I hope I will soon prosper too. Well, I like that part too.
I know, right?
Bring it
I like
on.
that part too. So now we'll go into Ecclesiastes. These are written separately, clearly in a different kind of philosophical mindset. Biblical scholars believe that they're written around in the Hellenistic period, roughly around the time the Septuagint was written, around 250 BC in Alexandria, Egypt, which I didn't write down. And though some may be from the Persian period, but really this is from Alexandria and really reflects Hellenistic thinking at the time. And they clearly have a different tone than the Proverbs. So from much wisdom comes much sorrow. The more knowledge, the more grief. Ecclesiastes. Whoever loves money never has enough. Whoever loves wealth is never satisfied with their income. That said, these are great passages. Do not say, why were the old days better than these? For it is not wise to ask such questions. Wisdom, like an inheritance, is a good thing and benefits those who see the sun. Wisdom is a shelter as money is a shelter, but the advantage of knowledge is this: wisdom preserves those who have it. There is something else meaningless that occurs on earth: the righteous who get what the wicked deserve, and the wicked who get what the righteous deserve. This too, I say, is meaningless. So I commend the enjoyment of life, because there is nothing better for a person under the sun than to eat and drink and be glad. Then joy will accompany them in their toil all the days of life God has given them under the sun. I feel like I did not get that message in church. Like, I don't feel like I got the message of like eat and drink and be glad in my regular Christian church.
I mean, there's always been that teaching of moderation that discusses that, and that's always been something, the wise people have kept that in mind, I should say, not maybe the zealots.
It's a very Jewish thing too, and a lot of Christianity wants to separate itself from Judaism, so such as that passage.
Right. No one can comprehend what goes on under the sun. Despite all their efforts to search it out, no one can discover its meaning. Even if the wise claim they know, they cannot really comprehend it.
Well, that would be especially so if you deny the mother.
Right. I have seen something else under the sun. The race is not to the swift or the battle to the strong, nor does food come to the wise or wealth to the brilliant or favor to the learned, but time and chance happen to them all. Moreover, no one knows when their hour will come. As fish are caught in a cruel net, or birds are taken in a snare, so people are trapped by evil times that fall unexpectedly upon them. Generations come and generations go, but the earth remains forever. That's a good one. That's definitely a goddess one right there.
Yeah.
This one's also good. All streams flow into the sea, yet the sea is never full. To the place the streams come from, there they return again. That's also speaking to the circularity of life. Another good one. What has been will be again. What has been done will be done again. There's nothing new under the sun. I find these all quite fascinating, though, ones from Ecclesiastes. They're a little bit morbid, like a little bit like almost depressing, but I find them to be very true.
Well, they're certainly, I don't know about you, Ed, or anybody else, but like when you have Solomon, who's considered to be the wisest of all, people, but then he falls into these terrible sins, I guess. Then you have these wisdom books. You do read them as a believer or as a Christian with a little bit of like, I don't know about you, but like my experience when I was reading these things as a pious Christian, those things were in the back of my head as you're reading this. And you're like, is this really wise? Is you never fully embrace it because of the story of Solomon itself,
Yeah, you get that little bit of doubt in your mind because
the book puts that doubt in you,
right,
regarding him. So
which is a paradox unto itself, right?
Yeah.
Thing about wisdom is that in the true case of wisdom, it's embodied, right? Like you can read about it and understand it, but until it's embodied, it's not actually wisdom.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Until you really learn it for yourself. I always like to think about walking down the street knowledge. If I can't use something as I'm like in my regular day-to-day life, I probably forget it, and I don't even care to remember it. Like stuff I learned in school. But if it doesn't affect me in my life, then out it goes. No room in my brain to
You're
hold on
talking
to
about algebra.
it. Well,
Lost
definitely
it.
calculus, which I definitely probably in my French class.
Well, you could read the back of a shampoo bottle with that French class.
Right. So Wisdom of Solomon.
Oh, here we go.
This is actually really one of my favorite texts I came
Yeah.
across anywhere. So this is one of the apocryphal books of the Bible. So the Catholics and the Orthodox like it. The Protestants do. The Jews and the Protestants do not. I guess the Coptics like it. It's a Jewish work believed to have been written in the 1st century BC in Alexandria, Egypt. Written in Greek. The Wisdom of Solomon reflects core beliefs of Hellenistic philosophy at the time when Sophia, wisdom, was elevated as the feminine aspect of God's glory and the bride of God. The text is in Greek, so it's certainly not written by King Solomon personally. It is a synthesis of Greek and Jewish philosophical thought and dedicated to the father of the wisdom traditions. And this sample is a short passage from a much longer book. So, I learned both what is secret and what is manifest. For wisdom, the fashioner of all things taught me. There is in her a spirit that is intelligent, holy, unique, manifold, subtle, mobile, clear, unpolluted, distinct, invulnerable, loving the good, keen, irresistible, beneficent, humane, steadfast, sure, free from anxiety, all powerful, overseeing all, and penetrating through all spirits. There are that are intelligent and pure and most subtle. For wisdom is more mobile than any motion. Because of her pureness, she pervades and penetrates all things. For she is a breath of the power of God and a pure emanation of the glory of the Almighty. Therefore, nothing defiled gains entrance into her. For she is a reflection of eternal light, a spotless mirror of the working of God, and an image of his goodness. Although she is but one, she can do all things, and while remaining in herself, she renews all things. In every generation, she passes into holy souls and makes them friends of God and prophets. For God loves nothing so much as the man who lives with wisdom. She is more beautiful than the sun and excels every constellation of the stars. Compared with the light, she is found to be superior, for it is succeeded by the night, but against wisdom, evil does not prevail.
That's my favorite text as well. It also mentions Sophia being the Holy Spirit in this text as well. And it's very Gnostic. This was definitely a Jewish mystic text, beautiful text. And especially being the emanation of God, the breath of God, the life-giving spirit. So that's where life comes from, the feminine aspect of God. So you got the father being the seed, the mother being the birthing. So you've got beyond sex. So it's male and female. That's we're creating the image of God, male and female. You drop the goddess, you drop the female, you are left with unanswered stuff and headaches. You need the goddess.
Yeah, very well said.
Yeah, for sure. I'm just gonna read it again. I learned both
you can
what is
read that
secret-
again. I was smiling the whole time you're reading that. It's great.
I learned both what is secret and what is manifest. For wisdom, the fashioner of all things taught me. Wisdom, the fashioner of all things. There is in her a spirit that is intelligent, holy, unique, manifold, subtle, mobile, clear, unpolluted, distinct, invulnerable, loving the good, keen, irresistible, beneficent, humane, steadfast, sure, free from anxiety, all powerful, overseeing all, and penetrating through all spirits that are intelligent and pure and most subtle. That part is really just super cool. Like this whole list of adjectives.
Mm-hmm. Free from anxiety.
Free from anxiety. I noticed that too.
Part of what I'm thinking about this too is like the idea of like the mystery teachings, and some of that might fall under the occult, which means mystery or hidden, but like that the feminine and the wisdom is held within knowing these mysteries. And here's all these different ways to try to sort of describe what that is, even though it's mysterious, because you have to learn it, you have to embody it.
Hmm.
It's like even hard to talk about it. I just want to like meditate on it rather than even talk about it. It's like,
Well, these are verses that it's really quite interesting why the Protestants didn't want to keep this or want to try to put this book back into the scriptures, because this goes very well with the Logos, right? The idea that there is someone alongside God. For the Christians, it was the Word, which I think I could make an argument. I've thought about trying to write some kind of paper on this, but the idea that the idea of the incarnation or the Logos or the second person of the Trinity, Jesus could be, or Christ, the pre-incarnate, could be understood as like a usurper of the mother in a way, because he's
Sure,
this
yeah.
understanding of the material.
Well, the Nicene Creed is obviously, they're kicking the mother out. I mean,
Yeah,
Father,
they
Son,
are.
Holy Ghost instead of Mother, Father, Son. And so this text directly competes with the Nicene Creed, like very emphatically.
Well, especially with the feminine here too, because that was an
Right.
issue, right? I mean, because of the language of the feminine's clearly here.
A problem too with Christians rejecting this text, especially Protestants. This is the only text that goes into a dying and rising Messiah, his soul being saved by God. So if they're rejecting this, they're rejecting Jesus ultimately. They're rejecting the Jews that would see Jesus as their eventual Messiah. He was recognized by mystics, some zealots, because some of the zealots were mystic. They pretty much all were in their sense, because they believed in the apocalypse, a final doomsday battle. But we have someone here that challenged this law, calls himself a son of God, and his ways seem strange and distant to them because he challenges their law, so they'll put him to death in a shameful death. Matches Jesus. This is why Jews reject it, because they see that as too pro-Jesus, and they also see it as too pro-Hellenism, or not a part of their tradition of what they call their Torah or their Jewish Bible. So they reject this. And then with Christians rejecting it, they don't know what they're doing, which is a horrible shame, a big cry for help.
But is this a part of Gnostic traditions? I mean, I assume that it is.
Absolutely it is, yes, because the only Jewish groups that use the word devil, because this mentions devil in it, and it mentions Sophia, that was a proto-Gnostic. So before the term Gnostics, this was a Jewish mystic sect, so what we would call Gnostic now. So This would be regarding to their sect, 100%. So if we go by this text, who wrote it, which Alexandrian groups are they talking about being written in Alexandria? They were the Therapeutae. We had the Margarites as well. They believed that Yahweh was a demiurge. So that's a BC era lot. So this text was written before Jesus. It's definitely Gnostic, especially with the dying and rising Messiah complex. No other Jewish group believed in a dying and rising Messiah. They would have said that's pagan. They would say, no, we don't accept that. Our Messiah is a king, but there were different concepts of what Messiah was. Then you have the Sophia tradition being mentioned, God's feminine aspect. Again, that's totally Jewish mystic. Otherwise, the Orthodox view was God was totally male. That's the Pharisee, Sadducee, and Herodian viewpoint, and which would later become the rabbinic traditions of today. So they rejected this text. They absolutely did not like it. They would call this Gnostic as well, or pagan Christian.
Right.
Well, they would eventually remove it.
Pagan, so. For wisdom is more mobile than any motion. Because of her pureness, she pervades and penetrates all things. For she is a breath of the power of God. And
there we are again. Like that's the Holy Spirit right there.
Right.
And she pervades all things.
A pure emanation of the glory of the Almighty. Therefore, nothing defiled gains entrance into her, which sounds sexual. For she is a reflection of eternal light, a spotless mirror of the working of God, and an image of his goodness. Yeah, the self-referential
Yep.
weird thing we were talking about before.
Hmm.
Although she
That
has been,
also kind of does too, because they just said nothing defiled gains entrance into her, and she's supposed to be spotless and like pure and all of that in that phrase there.
The virgin goddess.
Yeah.
for she is a reflection of eternal light, a spotless mirror of the working of God, and an image of his goodness. Although she is but one, she can do all things, and while remaining in herself, she renews all things. In every generation, she passes into holy souls and makes them friends of God and prophets. For God loves nothing so much as the man who lives with wisdom. King Solomon was called a friend of God. She is more beautiful than the sun and excels every constellation of the stars. Compared with the light, she is found to be superior. For it is succeeded by the night, but against wisdom, evil does not prevail. And there's more to this text. This is not the whole book. I just, I didn't quote the whole thing. And it's actually a rather long book. It has a whole bunch of different parts, the Wisdom of Solomon. It goes on for like 30 pages or something.
I remember the first time I read it after reading the Bible without this book in it for, most of my adult life. The first time I read this book, I was completely blown away by it. Just
I was pretty
absolutely
blown away when I
floored.
stumbled on it too. I was like,
Yeah.
what is this? This is
Yeah.
way cooler than any of the stuff
Oh,
I
yeah.
ever read in Sunday school, man.
I couldn't tell though if it was my response to it was just because it felt novel and yet it was sacred in this book, or if I would have always, had I been reading it from the beginning, if it would have always had that impact on me. I couldn't tell if it was the novelty of it, just having not read it that much and just seeing something for the first time, or if it just, if it would always have, if I had been reading it for years, if it would have still had that same impact.
I mean,
I'll show you a short reading soon too about something cool about with Yeshua after you speak. Edward, I'll wait for you.
I mean, for me, just coming back to the Bible and all three of the Proverbs, Ecclesiastes, Song of Songs, and Wisdom of Solomon, that, as I was saying before, this was like I grew up going to church in Sunday school and I read the Bible a lot. And frankly, it never made any sense, which is why I left the church when I turned 18. I was like, this stuff, I grew up on this stuff, and I'm 18 years old after, K through 12 of Sunday school. It still doesn't make any more sense now than it did when I was in kindergarten. But I never focused on King Solomon. We never focused on wisdom texts. No one ever like laid those out for me that these 3 books or 4 books all go together. And I was certainly never introduced to any apocryphal books. So this was the part that really like all the books of King Solomon were the part that really made reaffirm for me that there's real value in the Bible, like real fundamental value in the Bible as a whole, and something worth digging back into in these texts that made me. It's really what put the hook in me when I was, writing History of the Goddess for the first time, and digging into this research for the first time. The King Solomon parts were hit me very profoundly. And I've like I said, I recommend them to people. Like, if you want to read one part of the Bible as a newcomer to the Bible, like those 3 books are the best place to start.
Great suggestions too, Edward, for someone to begin, because you're seeing so much there. You're seeing the law and everything, the foundation of it. Really good points to think on. And something I want to read as well was from Wisdom of Solomon, and this is from chapter 2.13, I guess 20. I won't read all of it, but this is something interesting. He professes to have divine knowledge and calls himself a child of the Lord. He has become a reproof to us and our thoughts. He is a burden to us to even see, because his life is unlike that of others and his behavior is different. We are considered by him to be base, and he keeps distant from our ways as from uncleanness. He calls the last end of the righteous happy and boasts that God is his father. Let us see if his words are true, and let us test what will happen at the end of his life. For if a righteous man is a divine son, he will help him and will rescue him from the hand of those who oppose him. Let us afflict him with insult and torture, that we may learn how reasonable he is and put his forbearance to the test. Let us condemn him to a shameful death, for according to his words he will be watched over. This is one reason why Jewish people would reject that, because they've seen that as too pro-Christian.
Yeah, striking prophecy.
So, my question for those of you who, were raised Christian is, were you taught and told to seek wisdom or to be wise?
No, you're taught to obey the law.
That's what I thought.
You're taught to obey.
Okay, that's
Thankfully,
what I
my parents
thought.
were pretty mellow. I was not like raised an evangelical or anything, so I was not in a high control kind of church. Mine was the low control church, the liberal kind of church. But yeah, I mean, you're taught to follow the law. You're taught to like feel guilty about like your sexual urges, and I was overwhelmingly had the feeling of like church makes me feel bad, like makes me feel bad about being like a human being. And then I'm just kind of like getting guilt beat into me every time I come to church. It's boring. The music's boring. You got to sit still. And then they beat you over the head with guilt. And that was overwhelmingly the experience I had as a kid before I even like articulated it or really understood it. And then by the time I got to be 18, I was like, I don't have to do this anymore. I'm out. I'm so out of here. Like, this is lame.
The wisdom that you're taught is to deny pleasure. I tell you that much.
Absolutely.
So, like, there is no wisdom in pleasure. Pleasure is the most deceitful thing, and the most wise thing you can do is learn that very early according to the Christian ethos.
And
the material world is sinful and fallen, and you need to put off the pleasures of the material world and just focus on the afterlife. And like pleasures in the afterlife, not in this world, which never made sense to me. It never made sense as a kid. I'm like, why would all the fun stuff be forbidden? And why do we have to like put it off for the afterlife? Like none of it ever like made any intuitive sense to me as a kid.
I honestly think these are the weeds. I shouldn't even say weeds, because weeds are holy forms of life. There's not even a word for this other than these are the ramifications of a monotheistic theology, because it seeds this kind of craziness into the human psyche that just shouldn't even be there, which makes people very uncomfortable in their own skin, which I think leads to so much psychosis, psychological psychosis, the feelings of guilt, which drive so much behavior.
I'd take it even farther. I'd say it's deliberate psychological manipulation.
Yeah.
That the Catholic Church does that stuff quite intentionally as a means of control, making people go confess their masturbatory fantasies and have to say, 12 Hail Marys because they had the hots for the girl next door. I mean, it's so absurd.
I'm just super shocked that people for centuries thought their babies, if they had a miscarriage, were in hell. That if they ate meat on a Friday, they were going to hell. And they literally lived with this belief system and held it dearly. I mean, even would pray rosaries for repentance. We're talking for centuries. And within the last century, you can just explain that away and just be like, that's not really true. I mean, the amount of people, thousands, maybe millions of people who lived under that kind of psychological burden, and now it's just gone. They just don't believe that anymore. I mean, how do people not see through this? Shocking to me. Mic drop.
Control. I mean, you get it like. I mean, you look how bloody the Protestant Reformation got. Like once Martin Luther broke with the church, I mean, it set up 200 years of like violence, like real bloodshed all over Europe, real big bloody wars over like these theological control.
And as we see this world start to crumble, people are going to run right back to this stuff, which is an ancient proverb. A dog returns to its own vomit. That's in the Proverbs too. I mean, people are literally going to go back to the same old thing. Like Solomon, there's nothing new under the sun. We're going to see the same cycle. People are going to return to the same craziness, and as we see like a return to conservatism, reserve to just more traditional things, as the world gets more shaky, people are going to want to solidify and find something more stable, not knowing that it's just going to reboot the thing again. I mean, I know that's a little bit of a pessimistic thought, but hopefully we can break through.
We've got a comment here from Melody M4763. Says, former Pentecostal, we did a lot of seeking out the Holy Spirit, which I heard some people in my church refer to as a Shekinah. I think I remember being told that Holy Spirit equals wisdom in Proverbs. She's exactly right, Melody. I assume it's a woman. Yes, the Shekinah is another name for female wisdom in the Kabbalah. So when I mentioned Kabbalah earlier in the article, they do call it Shekinah, and it is feminine, and it is absolutely part of this exact same tradition that we're talking about here. I could have used the term Shekinah more prominently in the article. It's totally appropriate in all this.
Yeah, it speaks to that mirror you were just talking about in that scripture too. In wisdom.
Yeah, Shekinah is just specific to the Kabbalah, as far as I know.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So I had a discussion online on Instagram where this young female, like I guess like biblical scholar, speaks, and it's very like feminist, and she was talking about Jezebel. And so here's all these people, a lot of whom were men, hopping in the comments talking about, but wait a minute, she was evil. She did sacrifices, and she killed people, and she was leading people to follow Baal, right? And so they're talking about how horrible she is, when part of the point was like, that Jezebel has become synonymous with, a loose woman or a whore or whatever. But I was like, okay, so you're concerned that she was, worshiping this other god. Yahweh was just another god. There was all these different gods at the time. Sacrifice had been going on for like thousands of years. It was really prevalent at the time. Occasional child sacrifice, typically not, because that's what people were getting uppity about. But they were essentially trying to equate Baal with like demons or Satan or something like that. And I'm like, you have to understand that not only is that not the case, but also like you're really concerned about her being evil and killing people. But do you know the history of the church? Do you know that the church killed people and committed genocide? And like, I mean, do people understand that? And some people hopped on, they were like, yeah. And other people were like, they were twisted about it, and they like couldn't wrap their heads around it. And they're like, but Jesus taught, and I'm like, that's not what we're talking about here. I'm like, you've got to look at the historical references.
So we will have a fun discussion on Jezebel when we get to Jezebel.
Yeah, I was wondering about that. What, Nathan?
Also, regarding the sacrificing, Christian theology, they say it's meant to be demonic, but Yahweh accepts virgin sacrifices. That's meant to be one of the most demonic things of all. But we look at the gods in Canaanite wise that rejected sacrificing. Doesn't mean all groups did, because there were different versions of that same god. Was El and Asherah, or Asherah. They were the ones that rejected sacrifices. Though there were sacrifices to these gods, but there were factions that rejected sacrifices of those Canaanites in favor of the goddess and El, 2-in-1 or consorts. But that's the only ones as far as I know of. Yahweh worship was always big on sacrifice. Baal worship as well. Even some El worship was too, don't be wrong. But there were some that rejected El and even Asherah because they were too peaceful. They want to worship Yahweh or Baal or Hadad because they want to go out raiding, taking their neighbors' wives.
Here's another thing that I think about quite a bit. And I was also thinking how this might apply to, say, Jesus, certainly Yahweh, also perhaps Solomon. And it's the idea of an egregore. Do you know what an egregore is?
No, I don't know.
I'm going to read it to you. I pulled up like what Google says so that I could read that to you. An egregore is an autonomous, non-physical thought form or collective psychic entity created and sustained by the shared thoughts, emotions, and energies of a distinct group. Originating from the Greek egregoros, that means wakeful. It acts as a group mind that can influence or direct its creators. Egregores are created intentionally or unintentionally by groups like organizations, nations, cults. They don't say religions here, but I'm throwing that one in. Feeding on continued attention and belief. The purpose and effects of egregores include a collective focus. So egregores serve as a mental repository for a group's common purpose, belief system, or identity. There, another purpose and effect is influence and autonomy. Once established, the egregore can become autonomous, influencing the behavior, beliefs, and emotions of the group members. Also, energy feeding. An egregore requires consistent feeding of mental, emotional energy from their hosts. If neglected, they may fade. Symbolic power. Egregores are often associated with strong, long-standing collective ideas, such as like maybe national pride, religious fervor, ideological movements. I'm going to say also things like purity in the afterlife. And then, so the etymology stems from that Greek word egregoros, meaning wakeful or watcher. And historically, the term originally appeared in the book of Enoch to describe angelic beings or watchers. In modern usage, it has a lot to do with like these thought forms or these ideas, like Satan or the devil is an egregore, but you could take any god and call that and call any of them an egregore. You could take King Solomon and call King Solomon an egregore. You could do that especially with Jesus or Christ.
I think you
So-
could. I think you could say Republicans and Democrats.
Yeah.
That too.
No.
Yeah, I mean, they're all over the place, right?
I mean,
Right,
the parties, you just described political parties when you were saying.
No,
I was
exactly.
like-
That's what I was going to say. I was not familiar with the term, but I'm definitely very familiar with the phenomenon. So I grew up in Washington, D.C. My father was in the
Yeah.
government. And I came, by the time when I hit 18, I was firmly a libertarian because I recognized that bureaucracies take on a mind of their own,
Yeah.
just as you're describing. So when you create a new institution, a new bureaucracy, my father worked at Housing and Urban Development. You create these bureaucracies, but as soon as you create this institution, it takes on a mind of its own. So even when the people go away, they get replaced with new people and they absorb this collective consciousness. And there's a collective will, if you will, in the institution. And so you wonder why governments do all these crazy things that the people don't seem to want. It's because they've got this institutional memory and this institutional purpose that even as individuals come out of it, new individuals come and replace them, and they become a part of this new collective. They become a part of the collective consciousness, and the institution itself rolls on through life as a collective mind that has a will of its own, and that is self-serving. And so
that's part of what it says right here. A group of people often thought through intense, repeated focus on a shared goal or idea, subconsciously or consciously create a psychic structure that gains a life of its own. Certain concepts for that would include companies, countries, sports team fanaticism, online communities. and like in the esoteric sense, certain traditions, they might be treated as like guardians or parasitic thought forms. In media, like there could be things that show up like in gaming, um, and then certainly in psychology or whatever. But I just wanted to introduce that topic because I feel that, if we're talking about some of these concepts, and like historically, if there seems to be a lack of evidence for these people in particular, that millions of people are basing everything they do in their lives on these people who might not have ever existed in
Right.
actual real life,
Mm.
but they've created these egregores, these huge, powerful, hungry, feeding egregores, and people are wrapped up in it. I would go so far as to say Trump and the MAGA cult is a massive, like, I mean, they feel like you could almost say psyop, but it's an egregore.
Or like, why are we attacking Iran? Because we've got institutions that have been wanting to attack Iran for more than 30 years. And so at a
Long
certain
time,
point,
yeah.
just the collective will of these institutions has a mind of its own. Even when
Yeah.
everybody in it is like, this is a terrible idea. But they're just like, goes,
Yeah,
come hell or high
inertia
water,
carries
they
them.
do it anyway.
Collective will is a great word too, and I'm familiar with this theology. I wasn't familiar with the word like Edward was, like same thing I was about to say, but I'm familiar with this theology, and it's interesting. It's been borrowed by some video games and even say by Berserk, the manga or show, and that's the idea of the collective consciousness of humans create the gods, which is cool. And Skyrim has that, so all their gods were collectively created by humans. So without human worship, without their thought, they have no power. So we collectively bring that creation. That's cool. And that's possible as well. That's also something some Gnostics kept on too. Fascinating.
I fully think that is something very real, that we can manifest these gods and their very power, that they are real because of us. And that's that idea of sacrificing them, that they need to be fed. The idea of sacrifice reinforces their existence. And if they didn't get fed through these things, they would die out and they wouldn't be around anymore.
Exactly.
Right.
Exactly. 100%. The gods
And
are
Yahweh
mortal, right?
knew that.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah. Yahweh knew that. Yahweh's like, you can only have me, and you got to do all the things unto me, like feed me, right? Yahweh was hungry, power hungry.
Attention hungry, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. 100%.
Very
Yeah,
interesting.
the gods are mortal. And if you're not thinking about them, if you're not worshiping them, then the gods go away.
Yes.
Like nobody's worshiping Horus anymore, right? Because we're out of
Which
that
is
culture.
also the exact thing that they tried to do, right? By eliminating the goddess, right? They're like, let's cut her off from the energy and the like whatever feeds her and keeps her going, right? They wanted everybody to forget that there was a goddess, that there is a goddess, that goddess exists.
Remember the story of Demeter, when the famine came upon the earth because she was grieving her daughter Persephone, and the gods were all upset because there was no one was there offering sacrifices. There was nothing to offer sacrifices, and they were all getting upset. It makes me think about what we just discussed, that they were becoming forgotten because things were so hard. So there's the the goddess is somehow connected in that story too, that if it wasn't for her bringing Persephone up, the sacrifices would never have returned, and the gods would have died.
Also, the whole thing also has to do with that cycle of life, death, and rebirth, and the telling of like this is how we got the seasons or what have you. So there's that, yeah. But it's this egregore, like concept or whatever is so it's almost palpable, right? But it's all right here. It's all right here. It's fascinating.
And I think it's evidence that consciousness is bigger than what's in our brains, bigger than it's not just inside of our skull. Consciousness is pervasive throughout the universe and throughout the cosmos. And so our collective consciousness is one of the pieces of evidence for that, because collective consciousnesses are totally self-evident. And we have, as we said, sports teams. If you want, sports fandom is a very easy example of that.
I feel like I'm pontificating here a little bit, just talking about, but the word, consciousness itself, this is such a buzzword. I'm a big consciousness proponent. I think we need to study it. But just like we were talking about the etymology of knowledge, and you have the conscience is con with science. Science means knowledge. Here we are with this idea of cutting again. There is no consciousness until we recognize, there is no consciousness of God until there's a reflection of God. Then there's not one with this idea of referential. The more I think we come into consciousness of the goddess, we will once again maybe understand what we're even talking about when we're talking about conscious, because we're recognizing the two, not just the one, because you can't have knowledge in the unit. There is no such thing. So consciousness is going to be the evolution of consciousness, our realization of consciousness, our understanding of consciousness. You have all these monists talking about consciousness until we actually start to truly worship her as an uncreated pair. We're never going to make advancements in our understanding of consciousness if we remain in a monotheistic frame of mind.
And everything's also an emanation or a copy of something that would also be consciousness as well, could be reflected on here on the earth, as I've mentioned before, with bees and ants, the hive mind, similar to the collective mind. You might have a lesser form of it, but it shows that everything's somewhat a copy of something. So if there's a higher version of something, then that proposes that there's a higher collective consciousness versus the lower hive mind.
Mm-hmm.
So more unity expressed instead of workarounds.
But the hive mind is a reflection of a cultural, of a collective consciousness, right? I mean, ants and bees, like that's and termites
Absolutely.
working together. I mean, they have a collective consciousness. They don't have, there's no laws and instructions. It's just encoded in their genetics or whatever to like behave in a certain way, but they know what to do and they know what choices to make. Even though they didn't like sit down and go to school, little bugs didn't got to go to school to know which food to bring back to the hive,
Yeah, it's a beautiful thing.
So anyway, we're an hour and 20 into this.
Thank you.
We can wrap it up. I think it's been another fun conversation. We will continue with King Solomon for a few more weeks, at least 2 more weeks. Next week we're going to combine his great wealth and building projects in the first temple, but mainly I want to talk about the Song of Songs next week. So we'll push those two together, but we'll try and focus more on the Song of Songs and whip through all the building projects. And then the final week, we'll have a lot of material. We'll see how much I can cram into one, but all the various extra biblical material. So I want to talk about the Ethiopian legends of the Queen of Sheba, the Ark of the Covenant, and the Kebernegast, the Freemasons, which I might combine with the First Temple, as well as the Arab legends of magic around the Ring of Andalib and other magical texts. But there's a whole bunch of extra biblical stuff that I want to talk about, but definitely the Queen of Sheba and the Ethiopian traditions, which are really potent. And we'll make a mention of the Freemasons and Hiram Abiff, which is a fun one. Anyway, there's a lot of fun material there. So, but yeah, at least 2 more weeks of a lot of material for 2 weeks. And so I guess we'll wrap it up. edwarddodge.substack.com. And thank you everybody for listening. Thank you, Joshua. Thank you, Nathan. Thank you, Lisa, the regular crew. And till next time, thank you everybody.
Take care.
You guys.
All right.
Bye.